we all online? We good? I'm having a tough time seeing you on this side, so anyway. Okay. Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to the regular council meeting for 7 o'clock for Tuesday, July 16th. Before I get started, the Village of Anmore would like to open our meeting by recognizing the many Indigenous peoples of our area, including the following First Nations with communities that are located in the region that we now know as Metro Vancouver: Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam. Further, we'd like to honor the important place in history occupied by the many territorial keepers of these lands and waters around us since time immemorial. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda be moved as circulated. Someone to move that? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Public input. Matters raised here for council's consideration should be constructively focused on agenda items only. Please limit comments to 2 minutes and save any questions for question period later in the meeting. Regarding item 9A, 1065 Uplands Drive bylaw amendment, the village is prohibited from holding a public hearing by provincial legislation, but must not receive any comments on this item. So I'll open up to public input. If you could state your name and address, please.
Greg Moore, Anmore South. I just wanted to make a comment on the community engagement report that's there tonight. So I've been a part of local government for about 25 years and never have gone through such a more comprehensive, inclusive process. And I just want to compliment the staff and the community for coming out to fully participate, whether it was at the 2 open houses, the 4 workshops, the haveyoursayandmore.com. There was no inability for someone to participate in this. And I think as we saw here, we got lots of great comments. We as the people that have been tasked with the neighborhood plan to take a look at it, review it, make any adjustments that might be necessary as we move into phase 2 and phase 3 going forward. So I didn't have a chance to comment on it, but I just wanted to say from the applicant's perspective, it was a lot of work. There was a lot of energy that went into all of those boards and all of that information, but hopefully it was received by you as council, but also by the community well, and that it was transparent and open and lots of opportunity to provide comments, which, as we can tell by the thickness of the agenda, I don't think there was any comments not forwarded to council tonight for your consideration. And we're looking forward to kind of taking the summer now and taking all of that back from a neighborhood planning process and make any adjustments or shift or whatever we need to do, and coming forward probably in September timeframe with the next phase of this. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments regarding tonight's agenda items? Okay, see none, we'll move on. We have a delegation from Icona Properties, Madison Moore, to present a request for the use of Spirit Park. Welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Ooh. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is exciting. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Madison Moore, and I represent Icona Properties, the owner of Anmore South. At Icona, we believe in bringing the community together, and we thought that hosting a movie night is a great way to bring people together. As we have seen in other Tri-Cities communities, family-friendly movie nights are a big hit and bring the community together. So I am here today to request the use of Spirit Park on August 22nd to host a free movie night for Anmore residents. We will be choosing a movie that is family-friendly, and we'll be providing free popcorn and refreshments to those who attend. The event will begin at 7:30, and the movie will start at 8 p.m. and will be finishing by 10 p.m. So tonight my request is twofold. One, I would like to request approval to use Spirit Park that evening on August 22nd, 2024, and a relaxation of the noise control bylaw 517-2011, Section 7, to allow us to show the movie until 10 p.m. at the latest.
I think our noise bylaw currently goes till 10 or starts at 10 p.m. anyway, so I don't think there'd be.
I have it here. It does say that on Sunday, so the 22nd is a Thursday, so it does say from Sunday through Thursday it's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Didn't know that.
Family-friendly movies are usually about an hour and a half, so we'd wrap up probably by 9:30-ish. Okay. But again, we still want to, obviously, the relaxation would just be so that we have lots of time to make sure.
Thank you. I'll just see if there's any questions from members of council. Councillor Weber. Yeah. Questions, comments? Yeah. Good. Anything else? I'll then ask a few questions. So what sort of, we do have a rental for the Spirit Park. I'm very well aware of it because I rented it when I got married.
Nice.
But I think it has changed the policy now, so there'll be a rental thing. What sort of, will it just sort of be BYO chairs and
Yeah.
blankets and stuff like that? So there won't be a lot of needed infrastructure. It'll be everybody
No.
bring their own type
No,
thing?
so we'll, there's events like this in the Tri-Cities, and it really is at any of the parks, and folks just bring, their chairs, and we'll have communication provided. I'm not sure exactly how we'll communicate it to the residents yet, but we'll have communication provided with all those details. And we'll work with a company to bring in like a screen and a projector and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, bring your own chair, kind of relaxed picnic kind of thing.
And you said it was a Thursday night?
That's correct.
The last question I'm going to ask is, that period seems to fall during when the P&E is on, and usually during the P&E time we get inclement weather. Will this be a rain or shine event?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. Probably, although I'm not sure how many people would be interested in watching a movie in the rain. So
Okay.
I'm sure we'll kind of see how it goes and make that decision when the time comes.
I've now prompted others. Councillor Richardson.
Okay, just to be clear, we have a bylaw in place that allows anybody to rent Spirit Park. So there's no special request here whatsoever. Is that true?
Through the chair, currently our new policy and fees and charges bylaw update is for rentals during business hours of the facilities. So in this case, I would presume that they would want Spirit Park and also the outdoor washrooms as well for that evening. So it would fall outside of the hours currently in the policy, but the current policy does not prohibit non-residents from rentals in Spirit Park. The previous policy was only for residents.
But the current policy, this would need special permission. And
Correct.
I would like to think that if we grant it for this event, we should grant it for every corporate entity that would like to rent Spirit Park. Like, I don't see the exception here, and likewise there's an exception on the noise bylaw as well. So does that need an official board or motion? Council motion?
Yes, through the chair, the noise control bylaw does have a provision that council may waive under circumstances the parameters of the noise bylaw. So that would require a council resolution.
Okay.
Councillor Cryer.
Thank you, Mayor McEwen, and thank you for the presentation. I think a movie night is a great idea. Okay, now, is it my mic? No one can ever hear me. Okay. Now, can you hear me? It's not, I can't hear myself speaking. Can I use your mic? I could just talk loud. That's better. Better? Okay. Thank you for being here. I think a movie night is a great idea. I've been the chair of the CC committee for 2 terms. This is my 2nd term, and we have talked about doing a movie night, but we have never been able to pull it together. So I think it's a great idea. Also, Councillor Richardson mentioned not a resident, but you are a landowner. So I think you should have every right to use the park.
That's correct. We were under the impression, we read one of the policy documents, I think from 2022, saying that it was residents and landowners. So that's kind of unprecedented of why we're
Okay,
here.
just to clarify that. Also, I'm worried it's not going to be dark.
We've kind of checked the weather, and then based on kind of where the trees are, this seems very scientific. Based on where the trees are, we're thinking around 8 o'clock would be a good time. And of course, we also want to be respectful of families and people that live in the area.
Fair.
So even though it might not be super dark, it'll be hopefully dark enough to show
Okay.
a movie.
Well, I think it's a great idea. And we did, in retrospect, I recall that we did rescind the Spirit Park bylaw to do events when we started the process of getting the hub, the community room here done. So it does make sense that you would have to come forward to speak with us about it, but I would definitely approve it if, I'm assuming we'll have to do a motion. Thank you, though.
Councillor Weber.
Yeah, all the mechanics of how to do it aside. I attended one of these, I think it was before Icona down in Ioko.
Oh, nice.
And actually, I seem to remember it was quite light, and it was really good. People just, it was casual. People got there in their lawn chairs. I think there was popcorn, then everybody left. And they deflated the screen, and that was that. So, I mean, you know, now that we're developing Spirit Park and we've got this facility, I want to do more community events. And if we can't get it done, may as well go on your coattails and get it done. So I'm supportive.
So I'll just check with Ms. Alrick. What is the next steps, or sorry, Ms. Shell?
I have a recommendation here that council approves the free movie night event to be hosted by Icona Properties in Spirit Park on August 22nd, 2024, and that noise control bylaw 517-2011 not be enforced on the day of the event until 10 p.m.
Could I get someone to move that? Moved. Seconded. I'll open up for further discussion. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you again for presenting and looking forward to the event. Okay. We'll now move on to Asset Management Plan Update, Phase 1 of 4. John Winger of JW Infrastructure Plan Limited is here to provide an update on Phase 1 of the Village Asset Management Plan. Welcome. I think it's going to be really important that you're close to the microphone if you can, and that blue light is on around it, just because I think we're all going to be very interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay. There, how's that?
That's better. Thanks.
Okay. I have a brief presentation for you tonight. If I can get that running. Is that going? Okay.
There we go.
Okay. There we are. Okay. So a little background on what I'm going to be. Is this going to work now? Okay, great. Just some quick background on what I'm speaking to tonight. In 2017, the village had an asset management investment plan prepared by Urban Systems, and that included all your infrastructure, with the exception of stormwater. And then in 2019, that was updated to include stormwater. So that was roughly 7 years ago for the main one, then 5 years since the stormwater. So this project that I've been working on is an update. So the intent is to take the 2017 numbers for the replacement value of your infrastructure and escalate that essentially to reflect costs in 2024. So that involved not only updating the cost based on inflation, but also including all the new infrastructure that you've added since 2017 in, because you've added a fair amount since that time, including this beautiful building here. So that was the first part of that's what I'm going to be speaking to tonight. And then there's a second part where we're going to take that information and I'm going to work with staff on looking at future funding for infrastructure. But tonight I'm just speaking to the update on the asset management investment plan to reflect numbers in 2024. Okay, hopefully this works. There we are. Before I get into the numbers, and there is a lot of numbers, I wanted to give just a really quick refresher on asset management. I'm not sure how many of you were here for 2017 or 2019, members of council. Mayor McEwen? Okay, a few of you were. Essentially, I will give you a definition here of asset management. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but the main point is that asset management is about making informed decisions about your physical assets to support sustainable service delivery for the village of Anmore. That's the definition from Asset Management BC. I want to tie that into the community charter. It's important to note that as village council, it is your responsibility to provide stewardship of the community's assets. And as I'm going to show here, good asset management really results in good stewardship. As council, how you can contribute to sustainable infrastructure is a main way you can do that is through the funding of infrastructure and having sustainable funding for your infrastructure and services. And what that looks like is sustainable funding is funding that's spread across the life of the asset. Many of these assets are long-lived, 80 years or more. So spreading those costs against the life of that asset is important. Having users pay as their assets are consumed is important. And also intergenerational equity. So those are all things that we strive for in asset management. So that brings us to the main purpose of the presentation, which is to provide a progress update of the 2024 asset management plan. Before I get into the numbers, I'll just take you through the process that has been followed. First, we looked at all of the capital projects that occurred since 2017, and we had to separate those into projects that were new assets to add them to the inventory and recognize those that were renewal related. So you weren't gaining an asset if you went and paved a road or renewed a water main. It's only the new assets that get included into the replacement value estimates. So I'm going to apologize in advance. There's a lot of numbers here. I've summarized them in a table just to show you. This really summarizes the new assets that have been acquired since 2017 in the various categories. So in the first column, you can see the total additions, which was about $20 million. That's since 2017. The column next to it shows approximately what percent of that was renewal, where you're rehabilitating an asset. It's not a new asset. And that is what the renewal spending amount is. The remainder, the spending on new assets, is that money that was spent on new infrastructure. So it's important to note those. Asset management is about taking care of the things that you own. So we focus on funding the infrastructure that you currently have. Of course, we have to add in the new assets when we calculate the numbers going forward. So I want to talk briefly about inflation. So once we've added the new assets into the inventory, those needed to be escalated based on inflation since 2017. And I think we all know how high inflation has been. And I've summarized it here, but cumulatively since 2017, it's about 25% approximately. So when I go through the numbers, you'll see that the infrastructure from 2017, just what you had then, is about 25% more to replace those assets than it was in 2017. And plus we have to add on the infrastructure that's been added to the village since then. So here are the numbers, and I apologize again, there's a lot of information here. I'll try to summarize it briefly. So in 2017, 2019, because we had the stormwater added, there was about $50 million worth of village infrastructure If we escalated those to today's values, that equates to about 61 million. Then we have to add in what you've added in new assets since then, and that would include this facility and others, which is about 12 million. So currently, the village is responsible for about $74 million worth of infrastructure. In asset management, we measure sustainable funding using a term called annual average life cycle investment. It's essentially if you purchased an asset and then you were to set aside a little bit every year, at the end of the life of that asset, you'd have enough to replace it. So if we looked at every asset that you own in your inventory and added up that average annual life cycle investment, that would give us, in theory, the sustainable funding level. I've summarized it here. In 2019, that number was about 1.2 million. Let's see if I'm reading that correct. If we escalate that to 2024, that's about 1.5. Then if we add in the asset management costs for new assets since then, that's another, I think that's approximately 920,000. So the total going forward for 2024 is about $2 million a year. So that is, in theory, what you would invest annually to sustainably fund your infrastructure indefinitely. I'll just touch briefly then on the funding, the actual funding side of it, because we had a brief look at how funding has been since 2017. I just want to explain that funding and spending are different here. So asset management funding is the actual spending that you make on renewal of infrastructure, plus any contributions you make to capital reserves. Because some years you might spend a little bit more and maybe not contribute it to your reserves, and some years you may not have much capital work that you're doing on renewal. So in those years, you top up the reserves. The idea is to keep the funding steady so it's not going all over the place, bringing it up and down. So if you can keep it steady, and we use the ALKI number, which is around $2 million, if you can keep it at that level, in theory, you're at a sustainable funding level. So let's have a look. I had a look at the last 5 years, and your average annual spending on renewal, what you actually spent renewing assets, was about $1.1 million. Over that time, you've also been able to increase your reserves by about 640,000. So your average spending, or funding, I should say, on asset management has been just over $1.7 million. So you can see how that compares to the $2 million. It's fairly close. So that was the update of the replacement values, the theoretical funding targets. The next step is to take those numbers and look at what future funding looks like. And I know there's been a few changes. You have some debt now from this facility, thinking about how you might want to fund that, to what level you might want to fund it, looking at a few different scenarios and options. And the intent is to, once we've looked at that, to come back and report to council on that.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
thank you.
you.
I'm going to open up to council for some comments if we want to. Councillor Richardson.
So, just to be clear, if I replace a water pump on the current water system, that's a renewal, not new spending.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And the amount of money we bring in, like we have our capital asset levy, which is about 1.4 million a year, thereabouts, I think. And we get some from the MRN road kickback from the province or metro, whatever it happens to be. but it doesn't add up to this 2 million. What this concerns me a lot. This says that our capital asset levy is actually quite a bit too low. Am I reading that correctly?
Through the chair, these are conservative, I would say. Like, we start with a conservative number. I wouldn't immediately say that it's too low. No. I think you're doing relatively well compared to a lot of communities. You're getting very close to that number. I think there's more that has to be looked at to say, is this too low, or is this enough? And that looks at what your current reserve levels are, what kind of capital investment might be coming up, rehabilitation in the next decade, the next 20 years. So I wouldn't make a statement that I would be concerned at this stage.
So just one last clarification. I read the urban systems report from 2017 and 2019, and in all those cases they had, replace a road every 20 years or 25 years or 27 years. Are these numbers based on the quickest replacement, the medium one, or stretch it out a little bit? Like, that made a huge difference.
Through the chair, yes, that these are not based the same way the urban systems report are. They would have a conservative view, or a less conservative view, that the assets may last longer. And I think they had numbers like perhaps they last 25% longer. That would actually bring that number down by a third. And it's very difficult to know. Some of the infrastructure that's in place today, like PVC pipe, we don't actually know how long it's going to last, because it started being put in place in the 1970s, and it's supposed to last 80 to 100 years, but we don't know yet. So it's not an exact science. I could just say that I think you're on a pretty good track right now, but I think the next stage would be to have a look at where your funding is, where the trend is, maybe look at, I think, what you're suggesting there, and to see if the funding is reasonable. Does it need to be adjusted?
I just wanted to sort of bring us up to where we got here. I was on council, I think my first year was 2008. And at that point, we were very, very fortunate enough to have somebody on our finance committee who was the head of finance for Port Moody, and quickly alerted to us on council saying we had a significant deficit issue. Then in 2012, we were doing an OCP review, and the APC committee said it's pretty tough for us to look at directions for growth if we don't know what growth is costing us. So we brought in Van Struth, and we did a financial analysis, viability basically of the village, and it was shocking. It opened up the eyes to a lot of our residents, realizing that 1 acre was actually a negative net to what taxation, and changed a lot of philosophies. It also identified we had about I think $10 to $12 million infrastructure deficit. And I hear the word infrastructure deficit through every municipality in this province, and the concerns that they have with it. We took in 2008 steps that first year of putting $125,000. That was a 10% tax increase in place, and we did that for 10 years straight to get out of the situation that we are. So to hear you say right now with your analysis that we're in, I'm going to say, very good shape, relatively good shape compared to others, it's nice to hear. I know in 2017 we firmed up those numbers through urban system by doing a deep dive, and that was by counting everything and doing a real specific, and there was some concerns about the lifespan of some of the roads, because our roads don't get used that much, and we can't use general terms in regards to how long they're going to take. They could take double as long, but we always went on the conservative approach. From the report that I see, it shows that we're probably about $300,000 short of a yearly contribution to be at that $2 million to be self-sustaining with today's assets. And we knew when this building was completed, this is going to be probably one of our most significant assets, and that. I think the interesting thing is that people don't realize that although these are village assets, they're actually liabilities because they have to be replaced. And so I know as a council, from a financial point of view in our financial meetings, we look at every asset and how we are going to start. The moment we move into this, how are we going to start repaying it so that in 40 years or 50 years when money needs to be spent, it's there. we do a fairly good job with it in some aspects to our fire department that we share with Belcara, but we alone are doing, I think, quite an admirable job. So I just wanted to thank you for your work, and just to kind of give where we are and where we came from, and it's been tough work. And you know, we are very, very cognizant of the assets that we bring on and what their costs are going to be, and ensuring that we're getting the best value for the taxpayer. We want to make sure that whatever an asset is, we're going to be able to speak to its value. It may not be a financial value, but it might be a safety value in that down the road. It also may be be able to reduce some labor content in regards to keeping people safe as well. So I'm just going to pass on to Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah, just 2 questions, really. Can you hear me? How come it works for her? Okay, well, I'm just about swallowing it. So I'll try and speak up. Back before COVID, before the real inflationary explosion, we were averaging around 2.4% per year in terms of escalative costs on that asset base. And then during COVID, that runs out to around 3.7%. So my question is, have you done any forward look or forecasting to understand whether 3.7 is the run rate, or if it'll settle back to a more normal 2.5?
Through the chair. I think if I could answer that, I'd be in a different profession, to be honest. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know where it's going at this stage.
Okay, so based on that, which is what I expected, probably, even though we're doing well, and let me ask this question first before I make the other comment. Relative to other jurisdictions and other municipalities, I would suspect, based on what I've been able to see, we're actually in the top maybe 5%. Is that fair?
Through the chair, I don't know if I could put a number on it or a bracket. I think from what I observe, you're on the right track. And I might just add, to really refine those numbers, because I know everybody would like to know, is it 2 million or is it 1.5 or is it 2.5? That's different types of studies. So you can do pavement management studies that will actually look at the condition of your roads, and they'll give different treatment options for them. That's a big cost for municipalities. I don't have that. You had a pavement management study done, I believe, 10 years ago, but it wasn't really usable for me in this. And you could also have condition information on your infrastructure that would give a better idea how long it was going to last. So we're kind of, as much as I'd like to say, is that the right number, or is there a deficit? I can't say that. I think we could find out more exact through some more study, but from just the high level look, it seems you've gone on, what you've done, I think, is admirable since 2017, putting in the asset levy. And to where you've come today, I think you've done a very good job.
Just to be clear, the asset levy was instituted in 2008. 2008.
Yes. Okay, so my takeaway is going to be that probably elevated levels are somewhat here to stay, and even though the 2 million may not be an absolute empirical number, we probably should contemplate accelerating a little bit and getting closer to that number in order to hedge inflation. That was where I was going.
Ms. Martin, our finance manager.
Thank you, Councillor Trowbridge. For our budgeting, we do increase our capital levy by inflation each year since I started. We maintain at least the consumer price index each year.
Councillor Webering.
I guess I'm concentrating here on the numbers on page 14. I'm probably less concerned about this 1.7 to 2 million. I think we've been kind of met with a perfect storm in the last few years when we decided to build this building, increase construction costs. It seems when we pave a road, we have a budget, and the budget is, you know, the lowest price is 40% higher than our budget. We've constantly been surprised. So I think, you know, this, the chart you have on the impact of inflation, I think that's been quite a bit different in the construction business, which is really what we're subject to. So this number, the difference in these two numbers could be a lot worse given what we've faced in the last few years. So I think I'm hopeful that the economy is all settling down and we're going to see those kind of traditional interest rates in the future. And I think 300,000, I think we can manage that. You know, I think it's based on a guess, and I think there's ways we can mitigate that. If it was $1 million, I'd be panicking right now and probably resigning. But thank you for the report.
Good. Well, I want to thank you for putting it all together and coming here tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll now move on to the number 5, adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held on June 18th, 2024. Could I get someone to move the recommendation? Moved. Second. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there any business arising from those minutes? No? Okay, move on to number 7, consent agenda. Any council member wishes to remove an item for further discussion? A. Anything else? Okay, could I get someone to move the remainder of the consent agenda? Move. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, we have status update, RC regular council meeting resolutions. Councillor Richardson.
It's really quick, but there's the item from April 16th, adopted on May 7th, with writing the letter to...
If you could just itemize it out just so we can follow, which...
It's on page... It starts on page 16 and ends on page 17.
Okay.
Right at the bottom. It's about sending the letter to the province for clarification on Bill 44. I don't think there's any intent to do that anymore. So it says incomplete. So can we just make a motion and kill it? Please?
So through the chair, there was sort of some draft letters circulated amongst council, and of course, as you know, the letter was never sent. In the meantime, council did adopt and implement the required changes under Bill 44. So I think by virtue of that happening, that that we could remove it from the list without a council resolution, or just mark it, you know, as not needed anymore.
NA
I guess.
or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm for that. Please.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay. So with that, could I get the council receive the status update of regional council meeting resolution for 2024 and just strike the April 16th, May 7 minutes about the letter for housing to non-applicable? Someone to move that? Moved? Seconded? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay. We'll now move on to 9, legislative reports. 1065 Uplands Drive, a zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw number 700-2024. Mr. Boyd.
Your Worship, there's a lot of paper today. Okay, so before council tonight is a zoning bylaw amendment in relation to 1065, zoning application in relation to an infill application. Staff have reviewed the application in accordance with the policy as set out by council as policy 61. The policy permits 2 units per acre, and the proposed development would meet that criteria, creating a subsequent lot of 18 76 square meters, which is just over a third acre parcel of land at the north east end of the parcel. So we've checked to make sure that the parcel of land has not been subdivided in the past 5 years. It has not. The parcel must be between 1 acre and 2 acres. The parcel is just over 1 acre. Does the proposed parcel of land have an appropriate graded area? It does at the top end of the parcel. I would note that the parcel is quite steep at the back end of the parcel, and at the back of the parcel it does contain a watercourse. There's no requirement to extend any municipal infrastructure, and the property has the adequate frontage of 140 square meters, linear meters at present. So the proposed parcel meets the requirements as described in Infill Policy 61, and support and assessment and prelim zoning reviews have been done, and staff are prepared to sign a preliminary layout review in support of the subdivision application. And I can put the recommendation on the table.
Let's just have a conversation first beforehand. I think there's some questions that council might have had on this before, and then I'll bring the recommendation on the table. Do you have some clarifying question?
Maybe a recommendation. Just through the chair to Mr. Boyd, regarding the appendix you gave us, is there any way to work with the occupant to move the driveway closer to the straight part of the road? I know that's in the subdivision application and that's with the owner. That would be a good suggestion for their own safety. I used to know the people that rented this other house.
On the corner?
Backing out of that driveway
Yep.
is terrifying. It's a suggestion. It wouldn't stop me from voting for this, but it's just something that jumped out at me knowing
For
that
sure.
lot intimately. So,
Yep.
just my suggestion. Thank you.
Any other Councillor Richardson?
I agree with Councilor Reverink. And then I recall we used to have a no infill if slopes are greater than 20%. I think. Was that removed in the last policy? It's not removed. So the way that we interpret it is the land has areas that are developable. So the top half is flat and the bottom half is steep. Okay. So it has a place to
Yes.
build a house. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, clarifying questions? Yeah. I guess I had two on top of this. The first one is that the map in Schedule A is not all that accurate. It does not show a creek that goes right down through here, which I know quite well because 1065 was one of the first houses, I think the Buttertons actually were the previous owners and built it. They were the ones that built that. It's a challenging site, very challenging site. And then 1075 got built, but underneath Heron Way is actually a fairly significant culvert for a watercourse to come down from the north underneath Heron Way. It goes through 1075 and also through 1065, which isn't shown on this. Now, we have received a subsequent plan here, but it does show. But I'm something like this of this challenge. I think it would be well worth to get a QEP to do an analysis of this lot.
So there's actually a restrictive covenant on title in relation to the creek at the bottom, and the proposed construction would not enter that setback.
Now, could that have changed because this was done, I'm going to presume, probably in 2007?
I could take that away. I don't have a definitive answer for you.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile to get a QEP to look at this site just to make sure that this is a buildable site. And I had some concerns about the grade. The driveway as well is challenging as well. But I do know that this site is extremely, with the creek, and it was extremely challenging to fit the two houses in there that exist now at 1075 and 1065. So I would certainly, before I make a decision on it, want to get a report from a qualified environmental professional to look at the site and to survey the site. Any other? So,
can I make a recommendation based on council's? I'd recommend that we amend the recommendation that and it should read that first and second reading are given to Anmore zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw number 700-2024, because that will allow us to make amendments if required.
Perfect. Good. So So the recommendation is that to give first and second reading to the Anmore zoning bylaw amendment number 700-2024 for further information that's been requested to come forward before moving forward.
Yep.
Good. Could I get someone to move that? Moved. Second. Any discussion? See none? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Now we'll move on to 11A, new business engineering service. A report dated July 12, 2024 from our Chief Administrative Officer is attached. Ms. Elric.
Thank you. So in 2015, the village entered into a standing offer agreement with ISL Engineering and Land Services for engineering consulting services on a wide variety of projects throughout the village, and the village has used ISL services since then. The contract is written up as a 5-year term and is renewable at the end of each 5 years. In 2020, it was up for renewal, and then again at the end of this year, it will be up for renewal again. And if council should wish to extend the contract, then staff would seek that direction. Alternatively, if council would like to go out to RFP to procure bids from other companies, we would want to get that process started fairly quickly because the term would be up again in January 2025, and that would give us time to go through that process. So the recommendation this evening would be that extension of the January 2015 standing offer agreement with ISL Engineering and Land Services be approved for an additional 5-year term to January 2030.
I get someone to move that. Moved, seconded. Open up for discussion. Councilor Weber.
I guess a couple questions. Is there any requirement that we have to go out to RFP for something like this?
Through the chair, no, there is not a requirement under our standing agreement. There is a clause that it is renewable for 5 years.
Okay. Second question, the big advantage to renewing this contract is to keep Mr. Boyd because of all the intimate knowledge he has of our village. Is that part of the deal, or could he get replaced tomorrow?
You can replace me tomorrow if you'd like.
Well, I would miss him because we really enjoy giving him a rough time, but I have to say he's always available for questions. He's always served the village very well. So as long as Chris is part of the deal, I'm in.
I will note that.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Richardson.
So just as a clarification, that fee includes Mr. Boyd, or do we pay him separately to ISL for his services as planner, or it's all lumped in?
So through the chair, there's two separate things. There's our agreement for the engineering services, which is budgeted yearly under our operating budget, $80,000 a year, and then separate and apart from that is Mr. Boyd's role that is contracted out through ISL as manager of development services. So that's two separate and distinct roles.
So from a, you just confused me there. So Mr. Boyd is not everything that's not the 80,000, or because it was $403,000 last year to ISL. So I'm trying to figure out how it kind of breaks up.
So through the chair, the amount paid to ISL through each invoice and each year, sometimes it is distinct to different projects, sometimes it's to engineering, sometimes it is part of the planning budget. I'm not sure whether Ms. Martin wants to add anything to that.
Yes, further to Ms. Elric, we pay ISL engineering services for a lot of our capital projects, and those are included in the capital budget. Mr. Boyd's specific role of manager of planning is a $40,000 budgeted item, and then we have $80,000 on the budget for general engineering that is for the village only. So there's village and there's capital projects.
Okay, so for the benefit of audience, we do projects and we use ISL. We pay Chris, and we have other engineering that we use ISL for.
I can provide the best clarity to your question. All the funds go through ISL. The village never pays me directly. The village always pays ISL. There's a number of different buckets for different services within kind of the agreement, the way that it works. And just for clarity, I always make sure there is a wall between me and the financial piece within it, that I don't have access to any systems within the village, none of that kind of stuff, to make sure that it's always separated so there can be no conflict of interest in those kind of areas. Thank you.
And I think it's important to note as well as some of that is also billable, that we're billing to certain developers as well as to what Mr. Boyd's role is. I can certainly tell you and attest to the fact that Mr. Boyd played a pretty integral role in developing this building and making sure that it came in on budget. So I tell you, I've been as long as I have been on this council and been through various reiterations of engineers. We are very, very fortunate to have you, and it's great. Sometimes I think we overwork you at times in that, but I think now with getting our own planner in-house and that, it's going to be a relief so that you can do more overseeing. So I'm certainly going to be supportive of this. So with that being said, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to a development variance permit request for 2965A Sunnyside Road. Mr. Boyd.
I'm back. Thank you, Worship. So we have a development variance permit in front of you tonight. It's a complicated one. So the existing lot currently has 2 principal dwellings on the lot, which was somewhat allowable in the past to have 2 principal dwellings on a lot, and now the applicant wishes to subdivide to allow selling of one of the properties on the lot, is my understanding. And unable to do that, they need to actually subdivide the lot to be able to sell just a single property off of the lot. So they're coming forward and asking for a subdivision, and for me as the approving officer to provide the subdivision, they would need a variance in relation to the road frontage, because currently the lot is serviced via what we refer to as a panhandle, which is a thin sliver of land onto Sunnyside Road, which actually doesn't meet the requirements of minimum frontage as per the LGA and our own bylaws, which stipulate that it should be a minimum of 10% of the perimeter of the property. So in order for me to be allowed to subdivide it, I need a variance from council to allow me to negate the 10% requirement of frontage onto the property. Now I'd also add, typically if this didn't have any properties on this property and someone came forward and asked for a subdivision using a panhandle, I would refuse it based upon where the bylaws are currently sit. But because there are 2 existing properties already on the property, that's why it's for consideration of council tonight to consider if we want to provide this variance of negating the 10% requirement.
Yeah, this is very challenging.
Yes.
I know one of the things regarding the panhandles and the elimination of them was the response time by our Saskatchewan Volunteer Fire Department. This could open up the possibility to have 6 residents in there with carriage houses, suites as well, which is very concerning. So I'm wondering, before we move forward, I would first of all like to get a history of how this happened, because I wasn't aware that you could build 2 principal residences on 2.4 acres of land, number one. And number two, with a 7.5 meter panhandle, which is not a very wide panhandle, I would sure like to get some comments from our fire chief as to what his thoughts are on this before moving forward. So those would be the two things that I would ask, a detailed history of how this came about, number one, and then second of all, some comments from our fire chief in regards to his thoughts on this. I'll open up to council though if they have any questions as well. Councillor Wevering. Oh, Councillor Trowbridge, sorry. Didn't see you. We can't hear you.
Nobody can hear me anyway. So in addition to, I agree with Mayor McEwen, but in addition to that, if I was to vote in favor of this, just to the point about the multiple residents, I would want a caveat written into the approval to restrict the development if subdivided to the existing dwellings. No expansion of those dwellings within the panhandle. We ruled years and years ago that that was a safety issue. I don't want to go against a safety policy.
Councillor Wevering.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, safety is paramount, but I also understand that, you know, we have a legacy in Anmore of these kinds of developments, and I sympathize with the landowners. So I certainly want to be, I want to help them, and I want to see this move forward, but not at the expense of safety. And I don't want to see, you know, more and more development on these odd lots that are hard to access for a fire truck, and our fire trucks are getting bigger and bigger. So I totally agree with what Mayor McEwen said, but overall I'm supportive of it.
Councillor Cryer.
Thank you. Can you hear it? Okay. I do agree with the safety concerns and putting a few parameters in place before we approve it, but I hope that we can figure out a way to make this work for the homeowner. I would hate to have them strapped and not be able to sell their property because of something that is a legacy issue. That doesn't seem right. So I'm hopeful we can figure something out, but I am glad that was brought up about the safety issue.
Councillor Richardson.
Complete agreement with everybody, but if you're allowed to have two principal residences today, both principal residents would be allowed to have suites, would they not? Would they each be allowed to have a carriage house today?
Not today, because the way that the bylaw is written is that there was a subsection within the zoning bylaw which allowed to have a additional principal dwelling, but there was not an addition to say and an additional coach house and an additional suite. Okay. So as of today, they'd really only be allowed, if I was reviewing it today, if they wanted to come forward for a coach house, just the way it's zoned and subdivided today, they would only be allowed to build a coach house and a suite.
Not a suite in each house.
Correct.
Okay. And if you subdivide, then they would be allowed currently to have a suite and a coach house, and the only way we could control that would be with a restrictive covenant?
More than likely, yes, would be the instrument to use.
Okay, so I'm in favor, as Councillor Wevering says, like, we have these weird lots, and I don't think you should be punished because you have some weird historical lot in Anmore. So right now they get serviced by the fire department as is with the road as is. And if we put restricted covenants on suites and carriage houses, I'm okay with it. So I think that would cover most of the concerns. But if we need a report from Jay Sharp or something like that, I'm okay with that too.
I do, looking at the topographic, I do notice that there are 3 structures, significant structures already on the site. I can't read, how big is the, I guess it's called a utility shop? How big is that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to zoom in on the computer to find it. So the way I would describe this is that if this property were allowed to be subdivided into 1 acre parcels, just say, we'd still look at it in terms of compliance that they already have a significant accessory structure on one of the new proposed lots. So that would probably preclude you to be able to build a significant coach house at that point in time. But again, I'd also say that there's nothing to stop the new landowner to be able to demolish that shop to then allow them to build a coach house if they wanted to into the future. So the only way to really do it, if that is council's concern, would be via a restrictive covenant, more than likely.
But they could also just convert it without any sort of approvals.
Yes, but that would be breaking bylaws and subject to fines and work stop orders.
Okay, so the recommendation would be that so that staff be directed to assess and report back to council. Oh no, that's the wrong one.
I think the written one here is perhaps not adequate. I think I think we need to go back. Michelle, no doubt, has the correct version.
Michelle, do you have a recommendation for us?
I do have a suggestion that staff be directed to report back to council on the history of development of 2965A Sunnyside Road, and that staff request comments from the SBFD Fire Chief on the DBP permit request.
Perfect. Could I get someone to move that? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Now we'll move on to Anmore Capital Projects update. Ms. Martin, a report dated July 12th.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This report is to provide Council with an update on the financial impact of recently completed and ongoing capital projects. This report serves as a high-level financial update of the various capital projects in flow for 2024. With our financial plan bylaw, we have $5.8 million of capital projects on the books for 2024. These are made up of both grants and tax reserves or capital reserves. And so far to date, we're about 25% or 20% into that budget. We did a proactive approach, and staff met and discussed our completed projects and some that are about to complete, and noticed that specifically our roadworks contract is trending to be slightly higher than the budgeted amount, as this value is over $75,000. So our policy 8 shows that we come to council for over $75,000 of increased budget. So we're bringing this forward to ask for an amendment to our budget, future amended budget, to add $80,000 to the capital, the overall capital budget, so that we may have the opportunity to complete all of our projects that are on the books for this year. We also have the opportunity then to put projects together so that we can quote on multiple projects at the same time. And the main project that we're seeing a flow that is slightly over our budget is the multi-use pathway, which Mr. Boyd is here to speak to. The multi-use pathway was budgeted in 2022, was when we first brought that report to council. And that was covered 70% by a grant of $500,000. So this addition of $80,000, along with surpluses we've been able to see in other roadworks, will help us to complete this project. Mr. Boyd?
We'll see if Mr. Boyd has any questions. So do you have a recommendation?
I do have a recommendation that an additional $80,000 from capital reserves be allocated to complete capital projects as indicated in the report dated July 12, 2024 from the Manager of Financial Services.
Let's get it moved and seconded. Moved, seconded. I'll open up for discussion. Then Mr. Boyd, you can answer any questions. Councillor Richardson.
Okay, so last council meeting we raised budgets by 80K. And another 80K this round. It was 160K. I think half our tax increase this year was to pay for the loan for the hub, and that was, I think, 160 or something like that, around the same number. So this is a significant tax increase. I know it comes from capital reserves, and I'm concerned, and I'm also concerned that we've only gone through 25% of the total capital budget. This $80,000 is 1.3% of that $5+ million, and I think it's too early. I think somewhere around November, if there's something to complete that's really critical, we should do it then. And I'm sort of more of, you stick to your budget and we delay something to next year, and if we don't take a huge financial penalty.
Yeah, so I suppose the reason that we've come forward tonight is to be proactive in this area, to inform council, because of past conversations that we've had about, hey, here's where we're currently at, and we're projecting if we completed every single project that was on the books, we would go above our spending allowance. So therefore we'll come to council now just to say, hey, here's currently where we're at. We don't actually, Ms. Martin can confirm this. We don't need to amend anything as of today per se, but we want to make sure that you're aware that currently we're projecting we might be, currently projecting we're $80,000 over our projections. And our projections are based on estimates as well. So it could actually end up at the end of the year, if we complete all of our projects, that some projects might come in under the budget and we won't actually need to amend the capital amount because we found savings elsewhere. We just wanted to make sure the council were aware that currently one of the jobs have gone over what was expected. So we don't need anything from council tonight per se. It's more about informing you that where the budgets are currently at. So in your assertion of, hey, we should probably do this in November, correct. We should probably, if we carry on going to where we're at, we should probably come back in November and ask for that increase at that point in time.
You know, I think we experienced this very clearly over the last couple of years, especially with paving. You know, we delayed the paving of Ludlow Lane or / Sunnyside, you know, for a couple of years because of the budget. And also we refocused the money and realizing it was more important to get Hemlock completed. You know, these are times where things are going over budget in regards, and as Councillor Webber, who's in the industry, is seen pretty clearly about and asked the questions earlier on about inflationary numbers and stuff like that. So I think it's good that we are aware of this. I'm hoping that staff will keep us updated on this as we move forward. I'm certainly going to vote in favor of it, but my hope is that $80,000 doesn't get spent and that we're able to find it through other savings and that. So anyway, I appreciate that. Councillor Webber.
I'm kind of with Councillor Richardson on this one. I don't want to approve another $80,000. I would prefer that we see some other project deferred to next year, or we try and find cost savings. You know, when this village hub looked like it was going to go over, we sharpened our pencils and we figured out how to bring it in on budget. I think we need to stick to our budgets. So I'm reticent to approve another $80,000. I know we may not need it, and I know you guys are going to do your due diligence, but I'd rather see something slide that, you know, is maybe less important than approve another 80 grand. Things are getting expensive, and I think we really do need to sharpen our pencils.
Ms. Martin has some comments.
Thank you to the chair for both those comments. I would just like to make note that we would only amend the budget probably next spring if and when that was required. This is more of an information item that we would be allowed to amend for this item, for this expenditure. Now within the charter, whether we show a deficit at the end of the year or we proactively amend our budget to increase our capital expenditure, either way, we have to report on it. So all of these things will happen at the end of the year when we see where we come in at the end of the year. We are just asking if we can amend the budget should we need to for this $80,000.
I think Councillor Trowbridge has something to say.
Yeah. I understand that concept and that we're not authorizing the dispersal of this capital, and rather than backpedal with other issues at the time, I would rather get ahead of it and approve these funds subject to where we are at the time. We can still decide not to move a project forward. We still have all those avenues to us. So I like the transparency because we have been caught occasionally. So I'm in favor of this.
Mr. Boyd has something further to add.
I just want to add one comment to the reason why the number is higher than was originally projected as well, is that within the grant funding that we had, it allowed us up to a certain, I think it was $750,000 allowance within it. And if we only spent to that number, which would have been the budget that's in here, the multi-user pathway would have actually fallen short by about 40 meters. So you would have ended up a path to nowhere as well. And so this council actually approved the construction via a tender to the contractor. I forget when it was, maybe 3 or 4 months ago now as well. So actually the capital budget via the tender was actually below that number, but it was above our estimate when we put the budget together, if that makes sense. Again, so it's just transparency piece of that we guesstimated back in more or less 2023. Actually, this one was 2022. Was back in 2022. The $750,000, but actually when we've got to build it in 2024, there was that actual cost escalation at that point in time.
Good. Okay. Don't see any questions. So did we have a motion? We did have a motion, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Passed. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the big report. The Anmore South OCP Amendment Engagement Strategy Summary Report, Phase 1. Mr. Boyd, are you talking on this one?
I know you're pretty sick of my voice, so I've got someone who's got a better voice than I do to help me with this report tonight. So it's a bit of a tag team on this report. I'll just give you a general background, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague, and then we will carry it, and then I'll do the final closing parts of the report. So the purpose of tonight is to give a summary of the findings of Anmore South OCP Amendment Application, Neighborhood Plan, Community Engagement Phase 1. There's many phases to go. This was just Phase 1, and it was completed as part of the Neighborhood Plan process that occurred from May to June. The process was initiated as part of the Anmore South Community Plan Designation Bylaw Amendment 686-2023. Okay, so the background is in December, at a regular council meeting, council provided the first reading of the OCP amendment bylaw, and subsequent to that, we've also passed a bylaw amendment, in relation to the neighborhood plan. We agreed to a terms of reference, and as part of that terms of reference, we had an extensive OCP amendment process and an engagement process. So as part of that that neighborhood plan process, we initiated our engagement of the village and the public. So I will hand it over to my colleague to talk about the phase 1 of the engagement summary process.
All right, thank you. First, I actually would like to thank the Anmore residents and other participants who engaged with us in the various activities that the village hosted as part of this first phase. And of course, I also want to thank the village engagement team as well as Placemark, the planning professionals who are working on the neighborhood plan, for all the work they did as well. So I think one of the most challenging aspects of this particular community engagement process is the understanding that there's people with different opinions, and that there's strong feelings that people have on different aspects about this application. But I'd like to say how pleased we were that the interactions and the discussions and the input were consistently respectful, and they resulted in productive discussions. So very much appreciated that. I also do want to emphasize that we are in the early stages of this planning process, and as I said when I presented the community engagement framework, that community engagement is designed to dovetail and integrate with the planning process. It doesn't drive the planning process. So this is just the first phase, and we will continue to do community engagement throughout this process. This is just step. So there's a lot more work to be done before any decisions are made. So our focus in this first round of engagement was actually to do quite a bit of inform, which is where we were communicating and sharing background information on the OCP amendment application, as well as the neighborhood plan and how it guides development. We also shared information on the process itself, because this is the biggest planning process that the village has undertaken, and so there's not a large amount of understanding of how this process works. And so we wanted to provide that along with a timeline to give people a better understanding of the scope of this project and the fact that it's going to take some time to complete. We also used multiple communication methods to share that background information, as well as to notify people about the opportunities. And those are reflected in the engagement summary report. And then we provided multiple methods for people to engage with us at the village, because we recognize that different people like to share their input in different ways. So we provided a lot of different mechanisms for them to do that. As the village-led process, I also want to emphasize that we had village engagement team members present at all of the events to monitor and assist with documenting what we heard. And we were also, of course, monitoring and responding to questions via the Have Your Say website. The input we collected at the open houses, the workshops, as well as some of the written feedback are all reflected in the report. The main summary report captures those key themes and comments, And then the appendix, which is much more detailed, includes a lot of the verbatim comments. So it's, there's a lot. There's a lot that we heard, and it was very much appreciated that people took the time. I would like to say that most of the participants did recognize that the Anmore South property would be developed and that the owner has the right to develop their property. But when it comes to what that looks like, there's quite a mix of input. So this is not quantitative input. These are open-ended questions where people can just share their ideas, ask questions, and share what they think. So we heard concerns and priorities. We heard that there was a mix of full support for Icana's vision, as well as others who would like to see the zoning stay as RS1, as well as really a full mix of everything in between. So there was lots of different, there was no consensus on what people want to see at this point. We heard concerns and priorities. Not surprisingly, transportation impacts was one of the top ones, as well as protecting the environment and protecting existing trees. Those are some of the top ones that came forward. But participants also weighed in a fair amount on the trade-offs between density and protecting green spaces. We got some good input in that sense as well. We also heard some new ideas, and participants highlighted information that they would like to receive as we continue to move forward. And that was a fairly consistent theme where people are interested, that those who participated, they're interested in getting more detail. They want to see what happens next. They want to see what's being brought forward based on this input that we're getting, and they want to see what's going to come from the future studies that are happening, some of them in phase 3. The engagement summary report that we're presenting tonight then reflects this input for those who participated in the process. And also we will be posting this summary report on haveyoursay.com, haveyoursayandmore.com on the project page under community engagement materials. So this will be a public report for anyone who wants to review it. As mentioned, the report does include a summary of our engagement methods, as well as the key themes and comments, as well as the appendix that has samples of what we sent out, as well as verbatim comments based on what the note takers were able to capture. With this input and the baseline studies that were available at this stage, the applicant has a good foundation, I believe, to be able to take that information and develop the land use scenarios for consideration in the fall. And I'd also like to note that the next step after the land use scenarios are in place will involve another round of community engagement so that the community again can come together and share their input on those land use scenarios. And one thing I would say is, as I said, we very much appreciated that the residents and others who came to share their input, but I really hope that we see more members of the community at this next step, that we get more people involved. I know we have a little over 800 households in this community, and so based on that, I'm encouraging people to please, I know it takes some effort to get out and stay informed, but this is a very significant proposal for this community, this application, and I strongly encourage this community to take the time and get involved in the engagement as it moves forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I read through the report with a fair bit of detail. It was pretty long. I appreciated a lot of the varying opinions because I have not attended any of the workshops, any of the open houses, other than the one that was held here. I believe that was I've got the notes here. It was, I think a total of 150 people attended it. And then while I was there, I figured there was probably 30 people that I knew just in general, council and partners, as well as members from Belcarra who came up to me and that. So really worked out to about 120 people, residents, and that is what I calculated in regards to people out of council and that lived in the municipality. 54 people attended the workshops, 37 people at the technical open houses. We received 33 people online, or submissions online, and 10 emails. And I was just looking at our census numbers. So in 2021, our census, we had 2,356 residents or people that lived in Anmore. So in 3 years, so we're probably about 2,600 right now. If you factor those numbers, that's less than 5% have actually been engaged in this process to date. And I'm kind of shocked by that. This is a significant change to the village. And I just, Therese, I compliment you. I get all the mailers. I get all the information that's coming forward. I see the signboards. We're trying to get people out here. I don't know how else to do it. I've encouraged everybody that I know, get out if you want to have your say. A lot of people, I'm really glad to hear that it was respectful conversation, whether it was from one side to the other, because that's really what we strive for in this meetings, in council meetings. We want to, we're not always going to agree, but let's strive for respectability between each other and stuff like that. So I am really shocked at that, and I guess somewhat, I thought it would be much greater. Less than 5% are the people that have really got engaged in this to date. So I'm hoping things are going to change. Hoping, and I know with your good work, you'll maximize and get everybody who can get out. But yeah, it's kind of, anyway, great work, great report. Councillor Cryer.
Thank you. I too appreciate the work and the thoroughness of the report. I've read through it fairly well in detail, and I guess there was nothing in there that surprised me. I can't speak for everyone here, but I share a lot of the same concerns, the traffic and the safety, and there's just a lot of unanswered questions right now, and that's why we're doing this. And it is very unfortunate that more folks don't show up to take advantage of this. So they do have other opportunities, so I hope that they will take advantage of them, because I know that you're doing a good job and staff is doing a great job of trying to get folks out.
Any other Councillor Webering?
Yeah, thanks for the report. I tried to read pretty much all the comments. It's exhaustive, but it's a lot of comments. This is not intended to be a report to tell us how much support there is. Okay, thank you. It's kind of like the Stickum boards that we discussed, like boom, boom, here's all the ideas, but from all that information and input, you can kind of glean what needs to be worked on. It gives a lot of feedback to Icona, how they want to maybe tune this to garner support. So if that's the intent, then I get the report. And actually, I think Chris's was more the summary of everything. Some things surprised me, some things didn't. I thought there would be more mention of the safety aspect. I'm a little surprised. But then there was a lot of mention about the third connection. I was glad to see that. I think, whether it's in 5 years or 50 years, that needs to be on the books for the future. And I know in any subdivision development like this, people are going to be concerned about traffic. That's logical. And I think I even stated it publicly at a meeting that I don't think Anmore is going to have a traffic problem. Port Moody's going to have a traffic problem. So, but good work. It helps us. I'm glad that the process is moving forward, and I'm glad that everybody was respectful, because that's what keeps me at the table, is respectful, intelligent dialogue. Thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
So this is just clarification for the whole process for me. That was completion of community engagement phase 1. I also have the Schedule D from the terms of reference. Are we now through phase 1 of the neighborhood plan?
Yeah, I didn't get to talk about that section. Yes. So we've concluded phase 1, which was inform, garnering support, not support, putting out there that what the application currently is on the table. So the next phase, which will be phase 2, is where we start getting the detail of the land use plan. And so the land use plan will then start giving way more information. A lot of people through phase 1 were asking for detailed information, detailed questions about safety, about traffic analysis, well, how many units, where. And so in phase 1, we've tried to ask open-ended questions to be able to give the proponent, the applicant, the knowledge of what the public are thinking about and what their concerns are. So they can now go away and develop these land use plans, which will take us into phase 2 of the neighborhood plan terms of reference, which is about developing that land use, which will then, when phase 2 is concluded from the development of the land use plans, we'll then go into phase 2 of the engagement process, which will be engaging with the public again about garnering what their thoughts are in relation to the land use plans, which at that point, no doubt, I think it's going to be more informative to the public and for council for those more detailed nitty-gritty questions, because there's now something with way more detail that they can do more analysis upon. So I think it's really important to note that this has been high level. We're going to get into more detail as this moves forward now into the next phases.
Okay, so on the checklist, I have 3 boxes that I have not checked. So I'm just curious to know, are those reports somewhere, or like for the benefit of anybody who wants to read them, or are they just named funny so I'm not identifying the right thing, and we can do that offline. But I'm sorry, 3 boxes for me at least aren't checked.
I'm not too sure what those 3 boxes are. We can talk offline.
We can talk offline.
But from the staff perspective, yes, phase 1 is complete, and way more detail now will follow into phase 2, which I suspect will kind of lead back to parts of phase 1 as well to inform a little bit more on that.
Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah, I know this is not quantitative and these are purely random comments, but I have to say, aside from enjoying the thoroughness of the report, and I must confess, I skimmed a little because I have a life and I'm getting old. But I was really enthusiastic to the mayor's comment about a small percentage of people that are even representing themselves here. And we know from other community engagements for any development in any jurisdiction, those who are opposed tend to be the most vocal and energetic to get their voice out, which is fine. But this is quite balanced. There's quite a bit of support. And often residents that are supporting of something or simply don't care, we never hear from them. So I was encouraged by, although not quantitative, so don't coach me on that, I know, I was encouraged by how much positive feedback there was. I found that interesting.
So staff have actually been talking internally about how we can perhaps engage more and get more diverse conversation going within the community. So that's something we as staff are talking about here, about how perhaps we can reach out to certain neighborhoods or what have you to try and get input from the neighborhoods as well, to try and get more of that feedback as well. So.
Block the roads.
Pardon?
Block the roads. Anyway, someone to move receipt of the report. Oh, do you have another question? Nope. Moved, second? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Therese. Okay, moving on, Mayor's report. Not a lot. This is our last meeting of the summer. Hope everybody has a great summer. Just wanted to comment, I have been talking with our CLO, Ms. Elric, about the hub being available as a cooling center for residents if temperatures rise. We're working on that. Again, be careful, the fire ban right now is a big concern. Talking to Jay Sharp today, he said that it could escalate if we don't get anything in the coming days, any rain. Rib Fest is this weekend down at Rocky Point Park for all of you meat connoisseurs. And then we also, I don't want to steal the thunder, but we have our bylaw officer starting next week, and I'm hoping that that will help us with some of the garbage bins and getting out early on the Thursday nights. We'll be able to start doing some monitoring there. So that's all I have. I'll move on to councillors' reports. Councillor Weber.
Just a real quick one, because I know Councillor Richardson and Councillor Creer were there. We attended cardiac crash here at the Village Hall with village staff. I don't know if the audience members were here when Suzanne Wilson, a local resident and cardiac nurse, proposed to us to do this cardiac crash course in the village. It's a fantastic course, probably one of the best hours I've ever spent in my whole life. And I think this course will save lives, and I recommend anybody, when you get the opportunity to take it, take it. It really was a good course. And that's all I have.
Councillor Trowbridge, and then Councillor Cryer.
Yeah, there's been, and I spoke with our CAO, there's been a lot of increase in bear activity all throughout the village, and I just want to make sure that we okay, there's been a lot of bear activity, increased bear activity. There's always been bear activity, but I'm just hoping that we can review what we're doing and also contemplate having conservation officers or whatever we need to come in September and maybe help us some more, maybe go beyond what other municipalities are doing. I just want to see if there's anything else creative that we can do.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair. So I did have the opportunity earlier this week to meet with the representative of the Tri-City Bear Watch. So she has been instrumental in working with other local municipalities. She works closely with City of Coquitlam. She worked very closely with City of Port Moody. They just recently were awarded Bear Smart community status, and met with her just on some strategies. They did some education work for the village last year and some door-to-door education work, and helped us with some messaging last year. And we're very grateful for their support, and they're also willing to do so this year and continue to meet with us. As a result of that meeting, she has given us some information to sort of share in terms of education. You know, the biggest bang for our buck is to have folks really paying attention to their solid waste. And by that, we want people rinsing their recycling thoroughly. Their organics, you know, should be ideally frozen before going out on collection day. And essentially your garbage should have no attractants in, just your green waste. Washing your bins, no pet food or food delivery or anything outside. Watch your gardens and fruit trees, all of that stuff. It was interesting in chatting with her about strategies that have worked in other communities. She said something that was considered very high value was cart storage requirements, and really cracking down on ways that cart storage is a very high priority in the community. So that's something that we can definitely look at and take a look at in terms of bylaws of our municipality and how they compare to others. Interestingly, in chatting with her about you know, the issue of wildlife interaction with carts on collection day, the City of Port Moody back when they were doing their review and on their bear resistant programs actually did a study and concluded from that study that the interactions with the bear carts, or sorry, with the garbage bins with bears, was actually lower on non-collection days than it was on collection days. So from that, they gleaned that the issue really wasn't, you know, although it's at the forefront and you see the bears interacting with the carts on the roads, it's folks who aren't storing their bins properly or cleaning them and those types of things. She also gave me information on, you know, ways to move into meeting Bear Smart requirements. Some of those are easier to meet. Some of them more challenging. I would say one of the more challenging ones would be initiating a bear hazard assessment. That would be a requirement, and then out of that would come recommendations. Those generally cost about $20,000, so it would be a significant investment for our community, but something to certainly consider for the future. And perhaps working with this organization and the materials that she's forwarding on to us and to our communications coordinator, we can start with some more education. As Mayor McEwen mentioned, we have our bylaw officer starting next week, and we'll have him out and about putting reminders on bins and things like that too. So we'd like to really ramp up on the education, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions or report back anything else that I learned.
I would just like to learn more about that assessment, albeit a lot of money, because our local bear population have been habituated. So, for example, since 2015, I have not put any waste on the street at all. I've taken it to one of my businesses, and I've had more activity this year personally than I have probably in the last 8 years. So there's and I'm starting to recognize the bears. I'm starting to recognize a brother and sister from a few seasons ago and so on. So there's I think all of those are great things, and I'm not poo-pooing any of it. But they're habituated now, or there are a percentage of them that are habituated, and I have no attractants at my home, and they're coming up under my deck and right to my door and exploring, inches away from the door. So I would appreciate the investment in an expert trying to help us.
Councillor Cryer, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. First of all, Ms. Elric, have we ordered new microphones?
That is a summer project. I do have a one quote, but I need to go out and get a couple of other quotes, and I don't want to make any promises, but I fully expect at this point in time that for our first meeting in September that we should have new microphones in place.
Nice. This isn't like the bus stop, is it?
Oh, how is that coming?
Shot from the blue.
I don't really want an update, but I'm a little curious. Where are we at?
I use the same line that my colleague just used. That's a summer activity.
Just so
Yours
everybody-
is a year-long activity, I understand.
Yeah, just so everybody's aware, we have a secondary covered bus stop that will be located right, basically almost right in front of the fire hall on East Road that we've paid for yet, or?
Never eventually paid for it. So what the short story is, we can't power it via solar because there isn't enough exposure to the stop. So the one that is currently on Sunnyside is actually powered via solar panels, and so that's how that gets its power. We realized we couldn't actually get solar to work on the other location, so then we had to figure out how to power it, which added a number of complications to it, so we didn't actually ended up ordering it. So I think at this point in time we're going to go with a non-powered solution and just get an enclosure.
Okay. Thank you. I have been busy. I don't know what you guys have been doing, but I've had 2 Metro meetings. Regional Culture Committee. We did give out $300,000 to different arts, dance festivals throughout Metro Vancouver. We had Carmen's retirement, but I missed a meeting, so that's maybe why I seem busier. We are already planning for Ma Murray Day, and I have had 1 CC committee meeting. We've been working on our accomplishments and our goals, and we have a very engaged group. So they have a lot of great ideas, and they're looking forward to doing more things here at the hub and doing some things in the park. So I'm very excited with that group. Councillor Weberink mentioned the cardiac crash workshop. It was excellent. It's an hour, and really an hour well spent. And next week we have a C-Bus tour. I think a few of us are going on that, so I'm looking forward to that. And then just have a great summer, everyone.
Councillor Richardson.
I'll be really quick, and I'm going to go on about the cardiac crash thing again and say why I think it was so valuable. If you did CPR training in the past, it's the breathe, the count, the back and forth. Cardiac crash is designed specifically to take all your fears out of helping somebody and convinces you that doing nothing is far, far worse than doing something. So always do something. And that was a huge benefit, and it was an eye-opener to me. So I think you save a friend, save a counselor. So if you can do it, do it.
Good. Councillor Weberink, please, one more thing.
Sorry, I was supposed to say something about the bear thing. We were going to have an environment committee meeting where we were going to discuss this, and Ms. Elridge, I know you were going to meet with this person, so thank you for that summary. So maybe our next environment committee meeting can be a little bit of a workshop about sharing some ideas that you've learned, or maybe even meet with this person, because it was going to be our topic of discussion. And I think you mentioned something about combining it with a Parks Committee meeting, which might be a good idea.
Sure, through the chair, if that's something that council would like to recommend be referred to both of those committees, I think that that would be a great idea, and I can certainly ask the Tri-City Bearware representative if she would be able to prepare something or present to the meeting as well.
Okay, are you good,
Yeah,
Councillor?
okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to the Chief Administrative Officer's report.
Thank you. As Mayor McEwen mentioned, next week we will be having our new bylaw enforcement officer joining, so we're very excited to have him on board, and he'll be taking care of bylaw enforcement and other various related activities. We're also very pleased to have welcomed yesterday our newest staff member, Jazz Rattan, and Jazz will be in front of house. She's replacing Carmen Disowich, who recently retired. So we're very excited to have her on board. So please say hi to her next time you're popping into the hall. Next, we do have our Community Spirit Award open for nominations. So the nomination form is available on the website and also coming out through the email notification, and nominations are open until mid-August. So please take some time to nominate one of your fellow community members. And lastly, Mom Murray Day, is, as Councillor Cryer said, is scheduled for September 8th. The sign-ups for tables for that event and activities are being planned. Any questions can be directed to Sabina Perrin regarding that. And one more thing, I know I said lastly, but just to reiterate Mayor McEwen's comment about the campfire ban. So we currently are under campfire ban. So we will continue to update the community if and when that changes to either lessen restrictions or further restrictions. So please make sure that you are being very careful out there and that you're checking village messaging when you are contemplating a campfire, and being very careful with other hot equipment such as chainsaws and lawnmowers and that type. Thank you.
Good. Okay, we'll move on to some information items, some minutes from the public hearing held on June 18th, some general correspondence from Metro Vancouver, boards and brief, letter from the Life Saving Society regarding National Drowning Prevention Week. I'll now open up to public question period. Any public is permitted to ask question to council regarding any pertaining to village business. If you could just state your name and address.
Lisa, I think it's on. Lisa Johnston, 180 Hemlock. Suggestion, is it possible on the village telephone answering service that there is an answering thing that says, if you want to speak to so-and-so, press 1, so-and-so, press 2. Last week I tried to call the village because I had a neighbor's tree fell in my yard, so he was taking care of removing it, so we had to use a chainsaw, and I was really worried about him using a chainsaw with the fire hazard. So I was trying to get through to the village hall to find out what the rules are, could we or could we not, and the phones weren't being answered for 40 minutes, so I had to come in. But if I had the option of, hey, press 1 to get through to so-and-so or 2 to get through to, you know what I mean? Is it possible to set up the phones in that type of a system?
Through the chair, if you do have operation-related questions, I invite you to give us a call or pop in.
Yeah, I tried to call.
And all of our direct line numbers are listed on the village website. I'm not sure why that particular time it wasn't. I don't think our phone system is capable of that. We do have, in terms of fire ban, we do have a message on our phone to press a number related to the fire ban. But to list all, 15 of our staff members would probably prolong the message, but all of our direct lines are listed on the village website if you're looking for somebody in particular.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get through, so that was why I was trying to get through to Village Hall directly, because I wanted to talk to the fire chief, right, and just have a simple question, is it safe or isn't it? And it was a non-emergency, but it's an honest safety question, right?
Yeah, so the fire chief is not reachable through the Village Hall,
Yeah.
so you would want to go to directly to the SVFD website, and his contact information is there.
I did, yeah. I got his number afterwards. Second of all, just a quick comment about 5% of the people showing up to all the presentations. As you probably, many of you know, I reach out to lots of the community trying to get engagement of everybody, for, against, whatever. Like you said, development happens, so let's all have our little say of how we would like this to unfold. A lot of the people that I reached out to, the month of June was a terrible month to try to get in community engagement. A lot of people are away on summer vacations already. It's graduation ceremonies. So that had a lot to do with it. Another comment is there's kind of a us versus them in Anmore from conversations. So the people that live up that side of East Road,
I'm just going to
sorry,
ask
it keeps going in and out.
Excuse me. This is public question period, so
Yeah, my
it has to
question.
lead to a question.
Yeah, the question is, it has to become another way to engage everybody because they don't know. So people that are leaving Anmore through East Road all the time don't know or don't care about what's going on down here. And the people that are going this way don't know about Pinnacle. So there's got to be another way for the next sessions. I don't know if you have suggestions, because a lot of people that I've talked to, they said, oh my gosh, I don't even know. I don't know that this is happening. So we have to get more, because 5% does not mean that 95% are in favor. If they were all in favor, they would come and give their suggestions as well in favor of what they would like, right? So we have to find a way to get more people out. Thank you.
Okay, no further public question period. I have just one then to read to finalize, and this is to Therese. April 21, Mickelson Community Engagement Report about the rural versus urban. Numerous online requests for a yes/no referendum on the proposed OCP amendment in 2022 municipal election. I'm sorry, it doesn't make a lot of sense what's written here. Anyway, the second question, which the first question is basically in regards to, did the 2021 community engagement report have anything to do with rural or urban? Was that injected in regards to any of your consulting that's done through this period of time?
So this current community engagement is completely separate. It's being done as part of the process, and we're following best practices for a planning process.
Perfect. Okay, then I'll have my second question, which is to, and this was from Ms. Burton, will the 5-year contract renewal of the ISL engineering contract by the village include the salary of Anmore's manager of development services? What other services are included?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I think most of this was covered in the presentation of the report, but no, the manager of development services is not included in the engineering services, and the services that are included are engineering services.
Good. Motion to adjourn. Move second. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Have a good summer, everyone.